So the 90s in general was filled with all kinds of video games. And with video games, of course, there were TV shows and video games based on TV shows not necessarily needing to exist. One such case of that was Home Improvement, a video game that should have never existed, and it was based on a popular TV show. Of course, the game itself was terrible, and it did not it did not include an instruction manual, instead opting for the words, "Real men don't need instructions." So today we are going to talk about, 90s TV shows that should have gotten video games, whether they would have been terrible or not. But I think it's something that should have been talked about, and something that I think needs to be talked about because it'd be pretty fun. So here's a hypothetical what if. So let's take a look at a few 90s shows that could have possibly had some TV shows based on them. Real men don't need instructions. So today, in this episode, we are not going to be talking about the Home Improvement video game, but instead are going to talk about 90 shows, 5 90 shows that should have gotten video games, whether they were terrible video games or not. So let's jump right into that and start with a TV show that is a favorite of mine. Now, before I get started, of course, our first one is Seinfeld, that should have gotten a video game. I used images, fan art from off the internet. If this fan art belongs to you, I respect that, and I just want to get it out there so everyone knows that these exist, and I hope it brings some popularity to you. So just wanted to let you know that. But the first one that should have gotten a video game is Seinfeld. Now, what would a Seinfeld video game been like? Well, that would be tough to say, because it was a show about nothing, and thus you get a game about nothing. Of course, if they made Home Improvement a video game, surely they could have made Seinfeld into a video game. I mean, it could have worked on any number of consoles. I mean, you've seen a few examples here from fan art, like Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Sega CD. They could have done clips with Sega CD, like hypothetical, choose your own adventure type deal or something, and have just compilations of newly filmed clips, and you could have created your own like Seinfeld episode through various scenarios for a Sega CD version, etc. And if a Seinfeld video game had existed for PlayStation 1, you would have bet that I would have played the crap out of that game. Of course, if you've ever watched the show and you have a sharp eye, you can notice that in the background, in Jerry's apartment on his shelf, there are actually several Nintendo video games stored among his VHS and book collection on his shelf. And of course, we can't forget that George Costanza had a Super Nintendo. Yeah, he had a Super Nintendo, which makes him cooler than you. So if you ever watch Seinfeld, you'll notice that there's a lot of little hidden references to video games and video game culture. Of course, being the 90s and whatnot, video games flourishing. But anyway, that's one show that definitely should have deserved a video game, more so than Home Improvement did. The next one that could have gotten a video game is Frasier. What can I say about this? Well, I don't really have any particular thoughts. I wasn't a really big fan of Frasier, though I did watch it when I got older. And I was aware of it when I was a kid. My parents watched it frequently. I mean, I suppose it could have been like a platformer, or you could even have based a game around the dog if you wanted to, but, I don't think it would have been the best thing in the world, but it could have been made. But that's all I'm going to say about that one. The next one on the list that could have gotten a video game, of course, Full House, which was extremely popular in the early to mid-90s, as well as the late 80s. Of course, what would a Full House game would have been like? Well, you could have made one based around Uncle Jesse. Of course, that would have been real fun. Or you could made it like where you play as multiple characters. I mean, Konami even could have made this game and made it in the style of like how TMNT for NES was. They could have done it as an NES game or an SNES game. Hypothetically, how would that be? They could have brought in the whole family for the game. I mean, when it comes to discussing whether something could be a video game or not, it's kind of hard to imagine how it would be. So you kind of just have to say, yeah, it could be a game. How are they going to do it? Well, it's possible. The example is Home Improvement. It was made into a game. So why can't anything else? So whether a Home Improvement, whether Home Improvement was what they were trying to aim for, I think it was more or less just a cash grab, but a Full House game could have been like a full-on cash grab. They could have even focused on Michelle as a character and made it like a platformer, But that could have actually happened. Our next one is a pretty obvious one, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Definitely could have been a video game. You could have done like a lot of different stuff with this one. Of course you'd play as Will, but you could have made it like a platformer and just go through like different scenes and trying to avoid getting in trouble with Uncle Phil or something, But I think this one, like the Seinfeld game, or, like Seinfeld could have been a game, was a huge missed opportunity, and they really could have cashed in on it in the, early 90s. Of course, both of them were NBC properties at the time, and they really could have went somewhere with this, but for whatever reason, they decided not to. I just realized something. In this picture, those look vaguely like Sega Genesis controllers, yet they're playing an NES. Give me a second to process this. So during this recording, like I just mentioned just a second ago, I can confirm that the system was NES, but the controllers are Sega Genesis. That's pretty wild. They're doing a little bit of internet research. A couple people have noticed it over the past 10-15 years, but apparently not enough people have noticed it, that it's been brought to anyone's attention. So conspiracy theory, Mandela effect, whatever, have at it. But back on the real subject we were talking about, whether The Fresh Prince could have been a game. Absolutely, it could have. They could have done a lot with it. So that's that. And the last one on our list could have absolutely 100% have been a video game. Married with Children. It was crazy. It was wild. It probably would have caused controversy when it was, if it was ever released as a game, or if it did ever get released as a game. Because if you've watched the show, there were some very questionable things that went on. Like, they could have made it an NES game or even a Super Nintendo game. But if you've ever watched the show, it's very sexist. By today's standards, which even back then it was, but it even has controversy back then, but by today's standards, it's just considered like the pioneer of crude television comedy, I guess you could say. Like the pioneer of stuff that you see on Comedy Central now. But if they did make it a video game, it could have, they totally could have done it like I said with some of the other ones. They could have done like a side scroller or a platformer, and they could have even, knowing that the TV show itself, it parodied a lot of things or made fun of a lot of things back then. In some episodes, or I'm going to say a majority of episodes, they could have done like parodies of Super Mario Brothers or even Contra or something, and could have totally gotten away with it just for the whole comedy aspect of it. But, I mean, it was so popular. I mean, not only did it have a TV show, but it also had a comic book series. I mean, seriously, look it up. Married with Children had a comic book series in the early 90s. I mean, if you have your TV show and it becomes a comic, then the next step up naturally is to have your own video game, which it never did get, which is really surprising. And I joke with people all the time, and they actually think it exists. I'm like, oh, have you ever played the Married with Children NES game? And people are like, what? And they're pulling out their phones, Googling it, and they find out it's not real. I do that to people all the time, and, they're like, oh, I've never played that. It exists, and they, they fall for it every time, which I think is hilarious. But, yeah, it could have been a game. They could have totally have done that, and like I said with some of the other ones, it was a completely missed opportunity that they had a chance to do, but they just, for some strange reason or just some reason at all, they just never did. So that's that. So that's today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell if you want notifications of when we do more awesome videos. If you have any suggestions for future videos, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's video game related or related to video game technology or anything along those lines, online gaming, etc. Even computers, if it's PC or or whatever related, tell us in the comments down below, and if we decide to make it to an episode, it'll happen, if we think it's worthy of talking about. I do want to mention that we will be covering more computer-based gaming and computer technology and whatnot within the next few months, probably starting in August sometime. So you can look forward to that, which we've already covered a couple computer-based things. We covered a couple online things, but never really focused too much on PC-based stuff, or even Apple or all that. But we will be getting to that. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and until next time, I'll see you.